On today's Locked On Giants podcast, I have answers to your questions as our mailbag returns. That's coming your way next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code in all lowercase letters, LockedOnNFL, to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, folks. First off, I want to say a big thanks to everybody. You guys came through. I got a ton of questions for the mailbag, so I'm going to go through the ones that I have. I put them on my phone, so I'm going to read off my phone and just answer them. Those of you who posted questions in the comments, I tried to answer as many of those as I could, but just a disclaimer, if I didn't get to one of your questions, it's because A, I didn't see it, or B, it came in after I recorded the show. So that being said, if you want to, tweet it to me at Patricia_Traina and just put the hashtag AskPTrain. And if you do that, I will see it. I will pick it up and I will put it in the the Saturday mailbag over at New York Giants on SI, because I want to make sure I get to all your questions. All right, let's get to them. And by the way, to my Blue Crew community members, I see your questions. I'm going to answer those directly in the chat, in the Discord channel. So those of you who've been posting questions there, I'm just going to respond back to them over there. It'll be a little easier for me. All right, so let me get your first questions up. I'm going to start off with one from Matt R. And he asks, do the Giants need to replace Ronnie Barnes after disastrous rash of injuries this season? Do you think the players were quicker to resort to IR because the season was lost? Okay, a couple questions there. Matt, get this question a lot. Ronnie's job is to treat injuries. He's not there to cause them. The strength and conditioning coaches, those are the ones that, you would like to think are putting together programs to make sure that there's no soft tissue injuries and whatnot. Now, I know where the confusion comes in. A lot of people are like, well, they report to Ronnie Barnes. Yes and no. And I don't know if you've heard, but the Giants have started to make changes to the strength and conditioning staff, right? Frank Parano is gone. I think he's joining Mike Vrabel up in New England. Their nutritionist, I think his name is Steve Smith, he's gone. All right. So they are addressing that part of the operation. But Ronnie, he's been there for so long and he's so well respected around the league. I think if you went around the locker room, you'd be surprised. A lot of players, matter of fact, every player I've spoken to about him, they all sing his praises about, how he treats injuries, his recommendations, referrals. Players bring their families to Ronnie, if they need, a pediatrician, for example, or a specialist. And Ronnie's just very well connected. So I don't think Ronnie is the problem. I know a lot of you feel that he's the common denominator, given all the injuries. The injuries stink. There have been things that this team has done that I don't agree with post-practice stretching, weightlifting so soon, and not giving the body proper rest. That, these are things I've spoken about over the years, but I don't necessarily think it's on Ronnie, because Ronnie's job, again, is to treat injuries, not cause them. All right, but thanks for the question, Matt. Appreciate it. All right, up next, Chris K. He asks, Deontay Banks seemed to be good in coverage often this year, but just has some terrible ball skills. Is that something that can be taught, or do you think can improve in this area? And also, well, I'll get to this first one. You got a second question there. Chris, I think a big problem with Deontay Banks was, he came into the league as a press man corner and didn't really do a whole lot in terms of zone coverage. So when he was asked to learn zone, I think he struggled. And when he struggled, I think he lost his confidence. So, you know, the bottom line is if you really want to learn something and you put your mind to it, you will. But if you're going to sit there and throw up your hands and say, this isn't working, I don't want to do this, that's what's going to lead to effort questions. And I just feel like Deontay Banks does have the talent. He just needs to buckle down and grow up. It's just that simple. All right. You can't do in a job, you can't do everything that you like to do. There are going to be things that you're asked to do that you don't want to do, that you don't like to do, but they're part of the job. So you can either buckle up and do them to the best of your ability and take pride in them, or you can half bake it. So I do think Banks will learn. He's a young player. Hopefully, year two in Bowman's system will make a difference. We'll see. All right, now your other question was, do you think it's time for the Giants to replace both of their kickers? Gano has a pretty high tag number, and Gillen is also average. Interesting question, Chris. I actually talked a little bit about this on part one of my roster or franchise reset show that I did. Let's see, today's Friday. I did that show, I think, on Wednesday. And I said that, Gano has a pretty high cap hit. And when he's healthy, he's Mr. Automatic. But he has had injuries, lower body injuries. And I suspect that those have started to take a toll on his kicking leg. So the Giants are keeping Jude McEntamy around. I think they signed him to a reserves future contract. And I don't know at this point how serious the competition will be between McEntamy and Gano. Will it be a case of, just splitting the reps up so that, Gano doesn't get worn out? That's possible. But I did actually touch on that subject and say that, it was something I felt that needed to be watched moving forward. I know historically the Giants like older kickers because older kickers tend to have a routine down. They tend to, be able to take better care of their bodies and so on and so forth. So we'll watch that one. But that's something that definitely crossed my mind. As far as Jamie Gillen goes, he's an unrestricted free agent. If I had to take a guess, I'd be surprised if he's back. All right. Now, I say that every year that, I'd be surprised if this guy's going to be back or if that guy's going to be back. And there's always a curveball thrown in where a guy comes back that I didn't think initially was going to. Gillen has obviously the fact that he's a left-footed punter in his favor. And, that seems to be the thing right now. Coaches want left-footed punters. That said, I'm sure there are other left-footed punters that could be had out there. So I know somebody, I think we did an article actually on New York Giants on SI. Somebody asked about would the Giants consider drafting a punter or kicker? I don't think so. I don't think that would happen. I would be shocked, quite honestly, if that happens. Giants got so many needs. And I think if I'm stacking the priority of the needs, kicker is probably at the bottom of the list. So yeah, I agree with you. I think, potentially, the kickers need to be replaced, but we'll see if they end up doing it. All right. So thanks for the question. All right. Let's get one more in before we take our first break. This is from Dennis K. Is Brian Dable really a quarterback whisperer, or was he just a coach who happened to be on staff when two talented quarterbacks came through his teams, Tua and Josh Allen? That's an interesting question, Dennis. Um, a lot of people, I think that Dable is a magician, that he can take a guy who maybe is not a good quarterback and turn him into an all pro. And, a good teacher can make a difference, but there has to be potential there to work with. There has to be the want to work with. All right. Now, I go back and I look at Daniel Jones. And here's the thing that I wonder: why was Daniel Jones so effective, in 2022, the first year of the system? But yet he looked like he lost confidence in 2023 before his knee injury and then in 2024. What changed? And I don't know what the answer is there. I don't know if, the relationship with Dable changed. I'm not sure what it is. And that's the other thing you have to take into consideration. There has to be that bond, if you will. That's, I think sometimes, you see it with certain coaches and certain quarterbacks, and sometimes you don't. So, for example, Brian Dable had that bond with Josh Allen. He had that bond with Tua. I don't know if he had that bond to that degree with Daniel Jones. So, and I'm basing that on what we saw on the sidelines, the tossing of the tablet, the popping off, then the whole disaster with Hard Knocks and how, that just totally messed with Daniel. So, at the end of the day, Daniel Jones, I think, was overdrafted. They had hoped that he would be the next Eli Manning. I think they were taken in by the fact that Daniel, like Eli, was coached by David Cutcliffe, that he had a demeanor like Eli. Sometimes you can't do that. You can't say, okay, we've got to find, our next Eli right down to the last little detail. Everybody's different. And I think that's maybe where the Giants went wrong. They overdrafted Daniel Jones, in my opinion, back then. I was shocked when they took him sixth overall. Um, I thought they would go with Josh Allen in that draft and maybe look to get Daniel Jones later in the first round. But here we are. So I don't know if I answered your question, but in a nutshell, Dennis, I think it works both ways. I think you need to have a good working relationship between the coach and the student. I think Dable had that with Josh Allen. He had it with Tua. I'm not so sure if he had that with Daniel. It's just too many little things that made me think that, you know, that they just worked together and that was about it, if you know what I mean. So, all right, folks, we've got a ton more questions. So we will take a quick break and I will get to more of your questions right after this. Hey, Giant fans, it's playoff time. And if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns, and for a chance to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in as little as 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly, PrizePicks has you covered. And with over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. It's so easy to use, the payouts are super fast, and you can get your money in as little as 15 minutes when your picks hit. Plus, the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to your lineups. And here's a special offer just for our Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today and use our promo code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome on back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we're doing a mailbag. We've got a lot more questions to go through, so let's get into it. Okay, let's see. We are with Andrew G. has a question. First up, let's see. Are there positions that you would rather target via free agency versus the draft? Andrew, I'm going to pound the table for two positions in free agency. Obviously, a bridge quarterback, which I think is going to happen. But the other one that I'm going to pound the table for is cornerback. All right. I know last year the Giants tried to get a veteran cornerback on board, a CB1. They weren't able to do so. I think this year, with some money, they will be able to do that. And I think, that's going to be a position that they look to really, beef up. Now, as far as other positions that I think they might pursue via free agency, maybe, maybe offensive tackle. They don't have a viable swing tackle should they lose Andrew Thomas again. I mean, we all saw the fiasco. So, are they going to run it back with what they did this year? I don't know that that is the best course of action. Ultimately, though, what I'd like to see the Giants do when it comes to the offensive line is get some young talent in here. Develop that talent so that you have it in the pipeline. And if you do have an injury situation, you're ready to roll. I don't think the Giants have done a good job with that when it comes to the offensive line. And for the life of me, I don't understand why. I mean, we go back to last year, they didn't draft a single offensive lineman, they didn't draft a single defensive lineman. You can't have that. Given the short shelf life of those players in the trenches, you better have players ready to step in case there is an injury. Because when you don't, then you see what happened. The Giants had to sign, multiple guys to play left tackle who those guys were actually more career right tackles, and the results weren't very good. So that would be for sure something that I would consider. But to summarize, quarterback for the bridge guy, I would look for maybe getting somebody on a 3-year deal with an out after 2. Cornerback, I would definitely look for a CB1, a shutdown cornerback, and I think I've mentioned DJ. I think I've mentioned DJ Reed of the Jets as a guy that I'm intrigued by. Um, I don't think they're going to go after a receiver, a veteran receiver, unless it's like somebody, like a 4th or 5th receiver. But they do need some help there. They need, they'll need obviously maybe another edge rusher if they lose Azeez Ojulari. But I think maybe they look to draft there. This team has so many needs. That's why, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show. That's why I would not be stunned if the Giants are thinking about trading down to get more assets to fill some of these needs. They have the cap space. So if they need to do that, they can, and while they're at it, pick up some assets for next year so that if you don't get the franchise quarterback that you want this year, now you're in a position to where if you have to move up, you've got some bargaining chips to do so. Andrew, thanks for the question. All right, this next one is from E-Boy. So now that the next draft is coming up and the focus is most likely on quarterback, rewinding the draft when Evan Neal was drafted, there was the premise that the Giants were going to take an O-line as their first pick. And that year, there were a number of prospects creating a buzz. So far, Evan Neal has not lived to their expectations. So I was wondering about their evaluation process. The other top, okay. And then you say the other top O linemen taken in that particular draft. Do you know how they panned out? If I'm trying to remember, was Evan Neal one of the first guys off the board at tackle? I think they might have. I'm trying to remember. Evan Neal would have been pick 7. So, you know, I don't. I can't sit here and tell you how the others have panned out. I mean, I'd have to go back and kind of study and look at up their tape and all that stuff. I think part of the problem with Evan Neal is twofold. Number one, he's had injuries, elbows, ankles, you name it. He has had injuries. But here's the other problem with Evan Neal. Trying to get him to be consistent in his technique. Sometimes when you're out there in the heat of battle and you're getting beaten by your opponent, you're going to revert to what got you to the NFL to begin with. And Evan Neal, there are times when I wonder if he trusts his technique. Now, look, Evan Neal, for what it's worth, he's not a bad run blocker. In fact, he's pretty good as a run blocker. It's his pass pro that is not good. I think some of the problems he had in Alabama followed him to the pros. All right. A lack of balance, inconsistency with the technique, pad level, all that stuff. And that's why I'm kind of banging the table for him to be moved inside the guard because don't expose this guy anymore out on an island. If I'm the Giants, what I do for next year, my starting tackles are Illuminor and Thomas. I have John Runyon Jr. as one of my starting guards. I have John Michael Schmitz as my center. And then for the other guard position, I have Evan Neal compete with Josh Azudu with Jake Kubas. And if they decide to bring him back, which I hope they do because he's versatile, and I would bring him back if he's willing to play, maybe Greg Van Roten. So that's how I would handle it if I were the Giants. So yeah, E-boy, I'd have to take a look and do some more research into the other picks, the other offensive linemen, and how they panned out. I can't remember who was in that class, and again, I'd have to just kind of stack everything up for you there. But okay, up next we have Jeff N. With the Giants bringing back the same coaching staff and no big name free agent quarterbacks available, any free agent quarterback they are likely to get would be mid-level and unexciting. If we don't draft one of the top two quarterback prospects, what is there to compel Giant fans to spend their hard-earned money? Jeff, I can't sit here and tell you how to spend your hard-earned money. That is not my place. You have to decide whether the way the product is being presented is worth spending on. It's that simple. I know people that are going to spend their money regardless because they're just diehard. They bleed blue. Um, I understand where you're coming from, but it's not my job to sell, tickets for the Giants. I give it to you straight as I see it. All right. You say that, there's no big free agent quarterbacks to get excited about. Well, last year when the Vikings signed Sam Darnold, was anybody really excited about that one? And what happened? Sam Darnold had, up until the last couple of games, Sam Darnold had a pretty good year. So I don't know, man. I would maybe wait and see what they do. And by the way, everybody's assuming that Shador Sanders and Cam Ward are going to be, future Hall of Famers. Can we wait and see until they get into the league? Everybody was singing the praises of Caleb Williams, and he struggled. So sometimes you just got to let the process play out. And I can't believe I used that word process, but it's fitting here. Um, and as far as whether you want to spend your money to watch the product, that's your call, Jeff. I'm not going to tell you you should. I'm not going to tell you you shouldn't. That is up to you, my friend. But thank you for the question and for listening to Locked On Giants. All right, Edwin F. is up next. He asks about the schedule next year, which is very brutal. And he says, how much or little do you think this will play into the draft decisions? So he's talking about the schedule of opponents. I know Joe in his presser said he would not make decisions that were not in the long-term best interest. I believe if he does not choose a quarterback in the draft with the high potential of another losing season, there would be no reason to keep him and Dable. Okay, Edwin, I don't know what plan Shane and Dable presented to John Mara, but look at it this way. How many rookie quarterbacks come right in and right out of the chute, they take their team to the Super Bowl? Doesn't really happen that often. There's going to be growing pains with a rookie quarterback. And, especially as you pointed out, the Giants have a tough slate of opponents next year. They have, I think, the NFC North and the AFC West. That is a tough, tough slate. So there has to be, I think, a degree of patience. Now, if the Giants don't at least double their win total this year, or next year, I should say, 2025, if they get blown out more often than being competitive, I think that's a problem. I don't think anybody is sitting here and saying that the Giants have to go to the playoffs. I think that's a big ask for 2025. But what's not a big ask is that they remain competitive They remain in games, and basically they don't play sloppy, that they look better come week 18 versus week 1. All right. How many times in the late season did we see illegal shifts or illegal formations? That should have been cleaned up a long time ago. How long did it take for Shane Bowen to adjust some of his ideas on stopping the run, playing the run a little bit better? You can't keep going back and doing the same thing over and over and over and hoping for different results, especially if they're not working. That's the definition of insanity. And I just think, they have to be better or more prepared, if you will, to pivot if something is not working. I think there has to be a degree of patience. I know John Mara said he's running out of patience. I totally get it. But if anybody's thinking the Giants have to go to the Super Bowl, I just don't see it. I really don't. Too many holes on this team. Could they maybe get to the playoffs? Yeah. I mean, we've seen it. Look at what happened with Washington. Washington turned their tide around. Of course, they had a little bit different scenario. They had new coaching staff, new GM, new ownership, new quarterback. But it's not out of the question. It's just kind of a long shot, if I'm being honest with you. So um, we'll have to see what the Giants do in 2025. I hope they're better because, as I've said to you before on this show, I'm getting a little tired year after year after year. It just seems like we're stuck in Groundhog Day. And it's the same thing week after week. And, we all look forward to the start of the season. We all get excited after the draft, only to be let down. And I just think that's just so unfair to the Giant fans. I really do. You guys deserve a better product. I've said that all along, and I will say that until I can't speak anymore. So, all right, Giant fans, we still have a few more questions to answer on today's mailbag, and I will get to those right after this. Hey, Giant fans, this is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Ready for stress-free taxes and the most money back guaranteed? Get matched today with a TurboTax expert who will give your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so that you can get the most money back guaranteed. No more waiting, no more wondering, no more worries. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See Guaranteed for details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Just pushing right along here. I've got some great questions from you guys and gals, and I thank you for that. You guys you always come through for me when I ask. That's why I love you guys. All right, let's get back to some of your questions. We have a few more that came in, and again, if you didn't hear your question, pop it into my Twitter account or email it to me, and I'll make sure I pick it up on Saturday's mailbag over on New York Giants on SI because I don't want to leave anybody hanging. I want to make sure I get to everybody if I can. So, all right, let's get one in from Jonathan W, who's one of our listeners from across the pond. Wow. Hey, Jonathan, welcome on in. Welcome on in. All right, you're asking about. Let me see. The tough schedule we have next year with very few wins predicted. Should John Mara had made it clear that if Shane and Dable get the full length of their contract to show improvements rather than him not denying that they will be on the hot seat? Also, should this schedule influence the draft pick? All right, Jonathan, I don't think the schedule needs to influence the draft pick. I mean, look, I've always said the key to getting to the playoffs is to win in your division. So you want to make sure that you can stand toe to toe with your division opponents. And right now, I think we can all agree that the Giants can't stand toe to toe with their division opponents. As far as, John Mara making things clear, I've said this before, but when I listen to him talk and give his reasons for why he was keeping Shane and Dable, I'll tell you, there were times when I sat there and I said to myself, is he still trying to convince himself that he's doing the right thing? Because I just never got the sense that he truly, truly was on board with things. He's like, look, they presented a plan. We're fine with the plan, but I'm running out of patience. I can't say that the roster's better. He said a lot of things that just make you, go back and you look at them and you say, John, how do you really feel about this? And I just feel like, in a way, he put them on the hot seat before we have even started, the off season roster rebuild and the other stuff. So I got to be honest with you, that was kind of a head scratcher type of presser as far as I was concerned, as far as the answers. But you know, the bottom line is Shane and Dable are back. They're going to get an opportunity to fix the mess that they basically had a hand in. And if they can't, then here's the thing. Then you move on. All right. Now, this also ties in when people say to me, how could you sit there and say the Giants shouldn't take a quarterback in the first round? Number one, I don't know that one of those top two quarterbacks is going to be there to start with. But here's the other thing. Do we want a repeat of what happened with Daniel Jones, where Pat Shermer had his hand in the selection of Daniel Jones and then he was fired the next year? And Daniel Jones then went through an odyssey of playing for different coaches, different offensive coordinators, and different systems. I don't want to see that happen again. That's why the more I think about it, Johnny, the more I think it makes sense to go with a bridge quarterback. Give a bridge guy a 3-year deal with an out after 2. If you can get a quarterback in day 2 or day 3, take a flyer. What can it hurt? But if you're looking for the next Eli Manning, maybe you just say, okay, you know what? This year's class is not overflowing with top prospects. Maybe we just wait until next year. That's to me why I say, why I'm reluctant to say they should definitely take a Sanders or a Cam Ward. You don't want to have another situation like Daniel Jones. I mean, the Bears just went through it with Caleb Williams. That's not good for a young quarterback. All right. So that's kind of where I stand on this. I think, do this right, do this systematically. Don't force picks. Don't have any Hail Marys. And just, it's going to take some patience. Will John Mara have the patience? Well, if Shane and Dable laid out their plan, I think he's saying, yeah, okay, I'm on board with it. Then you got to live up to that. You've got to stay to your word. But if the Giants, as I said, if they come out next year and they are not competitive and they look like, a mess every week, an unorganized mess, and, a poorly coached mess, an undisciplined mess, then you darn right, they better get rid of, the two of them, because that's just not going to be acceptable in my book. All right, Johnny, thanks for the question. All right, Harry M is up next. He says, wouldn't Marcus Mariota be ideal as a bridge quarterback? Harry, I'm not feeling it. Sorry. I think Jimmy G. I think Justin Fields. I think if you wanted to go really, with a seasoned veteran, maybe Andy Dalton. Although I don't know that Dalton would be if you wanted somebody cheaper. I think I said Carson Wentz, but I don't know that I would go with Marcus Mariota. I've never really been ultra, wowed by him. I think, depending on what the Giants want to accomplish, if they want to be able to be competitive, get a guy in here who can win you some games. And, you're probably going to say, well, Marcus Mariota can win some games, but yeah, I'm not feeling it with him. So sorry. All right. Let's see. We got a couple more. G.I. asks, how good might Jackson Dart be? I haven't done Jackson Dart's tape, Right now, I know just from doing some preliminary research, he's looked at it as a day two prospect. So I want to do a little bit more study on him. I'm just now really getting into the various quarterbacks. So I'm kind of like going through the tape and in between, doing podcasts and writing and stuff like that. So I can't sit here and say that I would bang the drum for Jackson Dart. What I do know about him has me intrigued. I will say that. But, is he maybe the answer on day two? That I can't say just yet. I think there has to be some more. I want to see, the All-Star games, the combine. I want to, have some conversations with scouts and people around the league and just kind of get a better feel for how the scouting community is thinking, because I always say it, the fans, the media, we see things one way. The scouting community often sees things totally different. And I want to see if I can tap into some of that insight so that I can give you guys better information. All right, last question comes from Chris. Chris is back. Chris, love you. Thank you for the questions. Um, Chris asks, one of the few reasons to be optimistic about the Giants next year is Brian Dable's reputation as being very good with quarterbacks. However, looking back the past couple of years, we've seen the quarterbacks have some have been some of the worst in the league. Do you think his reputation as a quarterback whisperer is warranted? All right, I kind of touched on that a little bit before, Chris. But to repeat, in case you missed that answer, I think part of it is the player. I think part of it is also the approach. Look, the best way I can describe this is sometimes when you are teaching somebody, when you're a teacher, you're going to connect with certain types of students who apply themselves, students who are eager to learn, who are willing to change, their bad habits, anybody who kind of makes your job easier. And I'm not saying that Daniel Jones didn't try to make the Dable's job easier, but there was always a disconnect, and I think that disconnect kind of goes back to last year, where there were little signs of frustration that Dable would let slip towards Daniel Jones. And I think when that happened, maybe that played into maybe Daniel Jones losing some confidence. All right. I get it. Everybody's human, but if you're going to be a teacher and you're going to get frustrated with your students, you're not helping them and you're certainly not helping yourself. So that said, the other question, Chris, I think we have to ask ourselves is, was the talent that good to begin with? Okay. A lot of the problems with Daniel Jones from Duke followed him to the NFL, specifically the slow processing time, being a one read quarterback. So these were things that followed him, and they were just never able to get him from quarterback maybe 101, 201 to level 4 or 5, the advanced levels. And that to me, when you look at, okay, who failed who, it's probably a combination of the two. I don't think you could sit there and say it was definitely Dable, it was definitely Jones. It was probably a combination of the two. So, you know, Dable's reputation as a quarterback was where I think he's, when he has the right talent around him and he's able to do what he wants to do, he can make a quarterback look good. I think that was part of the problem this year. Certainly the injuries and offensive line did not help. Daniel Jones losing confidence in himself, despite what anybody says, it was pretty clear he lost confidence in himself. That did not help. So it was just time for a fresh start, if we're being honest here. And, look, Daniel Jones, I've said it before, good guy, worked his tail off, never put forth a bad step while he was with the Giants. I wish him all the best. I really do. But it was time to move on. Okay. We were 6 years into that experiment. How many more years do we need to tell that it wasn't working? And, sometimes you just have to cut your losses and move on. And that's what they did. So, all right. That is all the questions that I have. Again, if I missed one of your questions, please pop them in the email to me and I will get them on Saturday's mailbag over on New York Giants on SI.com. Otherwise, thank you as always for tuning in. And don't forget, we are still Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So we will be back on Monday with all new shows. I'm still working out the topics, but we'll come up with all new shows for you. So until then, everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.